You know that moment when you realize your family has been having entire conversations about your life without you, making decisions that affect you deeply while you're completely left out in the cold. And when you finally discover what's been happening behind your back, everything you thought you knew about family loyalty just shatters into 1,000 tiny pieces that you can never quite put back together the same way again. That's exactly where I found myself 11 weeks ago when my sister Jennifer screamed at me over the phone that I was emotionally manipulative for keeping my financial situation private. And then she spent the next 3 days trying to sabotage my career with fake online complaints under different names, going so far as to create multiple accounts just to make it look like there was a pattern of dissatisfaction. And when I finally gathered the courage to ask her directly why she'd started a separate message thread excluding me when Mom had her heart attack, she actually rolled her eyes at me through the video call and said in this condescending tone that made my blood boil, "We honestly didn't think you'd grasp the medical terminology or understand the complexity of the decisions we needed to make quickly." I just sat there staring at my phone screen, unable to form words, unable to process that my own sister could be so casually cruel, so effortlessly dismissive of my intelligence and my right to be involved in our mother's care. And that was exactly 11 weeks ago. And I remember the date because it was the same day I had my biggest client presentation scheduled, and I had to pull myself together and act like my heart wasn't breaking into pieces. Last night, something happened that I never expected. Something that made all the pain and anger and hurt from the past few months suddenly make sense in a way I hadn't anticipated, because Jennifer locked herself in her bedroom at her condo and cried so quietly that I almost didn't hear it when I stopped by to drop off some of Mom's medications. Those soft, broken sobs that only come when someone's world is completely falling apart. And I only noticed because Derek came by to collect his belongings, and the look on his face told me everything about how thoroughly her life had unraveled. How the person who'd tried so hard to destroy my reputation had somehow destroyed her own life in the process. And I stood there in her hallway feeling this strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness that I still can't quite untangle even now. I'm the middle daughter in a family of 4 girls, sandwiched right between the overachievers and trying to find my own space in a family that never seemed to have room for someone like me, someone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success and accomplishment. My older sister Catherine became an orthopedic surgeon with a practice in the wealthiest part of town, treating athletes and celebrities and posting about it constantly on social media. And my 2 younger sisters are both corporate lawyers at prestigious firms downtown, the kind of places with marble lobbies and their names on bronze plaques, working 80-hour weeks and talking about partnerships and equity stakes at every family gathering. Me, I work at Jefferson Middle School in the cafeteria making $12.35 an hour, serving pizza slices and cartons of milk to 7th and 8th graders, wiping down tables and restocking napkin dispensers and listening to 12-year-olds complain about Mystery Meat Mondays. And that's been my job for the past 17 years. Ever since I was 23 years old and fresh out of community college with an associate's degree that everyone in my family treated like a participation trophy. Growing up in our family meant constantly being reminded of where you stood in the hierarchy of achievement. And I was always at the bottom of that ladder. Always the one who didn't quite measure up to everyone else's standards. Every Thanksgiving, my sister Jennifer would find me in the kitchen helping Mom with the dishes, because that's where I always gravitated during family gatherings, toward the background tasks that needed doing but nobody wanted to do. And she'd say with this pitying expression that I grew to hate over the years, "Sarah, you really need to think about your future more seriously. You can't spend your entire life hiding in kitchens and serving lines. You're better than this, even if you don't see it yourself." My big sister Catherine would chime in while adjusting the designer scarf she always wore to family dinners, the one that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "At least finish your bachelor's degree first before you settle into this comfortable routine you've created. Education opens doors that you can't even imagine right now." And I'd stand there with dish soap on my hands thinking, thanks so much for that brilliant insight that never occurred to me in all these years. Their houses had electronic gates and 3-car garages with expensive vehicles lined up like trophies, the kind of homes you see in magazines with professional landscaping and outdoor kitchens and pools that sparkle in the sunlight. I rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment near the bus line in a neighborhood where you could hear the traffic at all hours, where the walls were thin enough that I knew my neighbor's entire television schedule, and I took public transportation to work every single day because my 12-year-old Honda with its dented bumper and check engine light that never went off wasn't reliable enough for daily commutes. They drove luxury SUVs with heated leather seats and navigation systems and all the latest safety features, vehicles that cost more than I made in 2 years. When we went out for Mom's birthday dinner at those expensive restaurants they always chose, the kind with cloth napkins and wine lists thicker than novels. They'd order bottles of wine that cost hundreds of dollars, and I'd stick to water with lemon, nursing a single glass of house wine if I ordered anything alcoholic at all, and they'd split appetizers that cost $30 and entrees that cost $50, while I carefully studied the menu for the least expensive option that wouldn't make me look completely out of place. But here's what none of them knew. What none of them even suspected, despite all their assumptions about my limited life and my limited prospects and my limited ambition. For the past 17 years, ever since I was 23 years old and serving my first lunch shift at Jefferson Middle School, I'd been running a hospitality consulting business out of my tiny apartment. Started with nothing but one laptop and a dream and an Excel spreadsheet that I taught myself to use by watching YouTube videos at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Built it up slowly and carefully through networking and word of mouth and social media posts that I crafted during my lunch breaks. Nothing fancy or glamorous, just me analyzing operational costs and creating efficiency systems and redesigning workflows until 4 a.m. before my shift started, surviving on coffee and determination and the absolute conviction that I could make this work if I just kept pushing forward. My client list now included 17 chain hotels across the region and 4 major conference centers that hosted thousands of events every year, plus a dozen independent restaurants that I'd helped transform from struggling establishments into profitable businesses. And I charged anywhere from $8,000 to $35,000 per project, depending on the scope and complexity and timeline. And some projects lasted 3 months, while others stretched into year-long engagements with multiple phases and ongoing support. Last year alone, after I paid all my business expenses and taxes and the accountant fees and the software subscriptions and everything else that goes into running a legitimate consulting business, I cleared $375,000 in pure profit, more money than I ever imagined making when I started this journey, more money than my surgeon sister made in her practice, more money than either of my lawyer sisters made at their prestigious firms. And I just kept it all to myself because, honestly, I discovered something powerful about being underestimated by people who think they know everything about your life. Something almost addictive about watching people make assumptions and never correcting them, about letting them build this entire narrative about who you are while you quietly build something they can't even imagine. And there's a freedom in that invisibility that I wasn't ready to give up. Not for anything. Then Mom had her heart attack. A massive one that left her in intensive care for 8 days with tubes and monitors and machines breathing for her, while we all held our breath and prayed and bargained with whoever might be listening. And nobody told me about it. Not a single person in my family thought to pick up the phone and let me know that our mother was fighting for her life. I only found out 3 days after it happened when I called Mom for our regular Sunday afternoon phone call, the one we'd maintained for years no matter how busy life got. And my Aunt Patricia answered Mom's phone and said in this shocked voice, "Sarah, why aren't you at the hospital? Your sisters have been here around the clock making decisions about your mother's care. We all thought you knew what was happening." "Oh," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral because I'd learned over the years that showing emotion in my family was seen as a weakness, a lack of control that they could use against you later. What hospital is she at, and what happened exactly? And my aunt gave me the details in this hushed, urgent voice that made my stomach drop, and that's when she mentioned it casually, almost as an afterthought. "Your sisters created a family group chat to coordinate everything. I assumed you were included in all the discussions about treatment options and care facilities and everything else." My sisters, all 3 of them, had made a group chat without me to discuss our mother's health crisis and coordinate her care and make decisions about her future. And I wasn't included because apparently I wasn't important enough, or capable enough, or worthy enough to be part of those conversations. I hung up immediately and called Catherine, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Hey," I said when she answered, "I just found out about Mom from Aunt Patricia, and I'm trying to understand why I wasn't told about any of this, or included in the family chat you all created to discuss her care and treatment options." She sighed. This long, dramatic exhale that I'd heard 1,000 times before whenever she was about to explain something she considered obvious to someone she considered slow. And she said, "Sarah, We need to be realistic about the situation we're facing here. Quality cardiac facilities and rehabilitation centers cost between $9,000 and $12,000 monthly. And that's before you factor in additional medical expenses and medications and follow-up treatments. So if you can maybe get someone to cover your cafeteria shifts for a few days, assuming the school can spare you during lunch service, perhaps you could visit mom once or twice a month when your schedule allows. But we're handling the major decisions and financial arrangements because this requires resources you simply don't have access to. I told her very clearly that I would take care of mom myself, that I'd handle everything from medical appointments to medications to daily care to whatever rehabilitation she needed. And Catherine actually laughed, this sharp, incredulous bark of laughter that echoed through the phone, and I could hear Jennifer in the background joining in with her own mocking chuckles. Catherine said, still laughing like I'd told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. I sincerely hope you're not talking about moving her into that shoebox apartment you live in near the bus depot, Sarah. Mom needs round-the-clock professional medical care from trained specialists, not someone who spends their days ladling mashed potatoes onto plastic trays for middle schoolers. This isn't the kind of situation where good intentions and love are enough. This requires actual resources and medical knowledge and financial stability. Jennifer grabbed the phone from Catherine, her voice sharp with impatience and barely concealed contempt. She said, "Catherine's absolutely right about this. We're talking about adult decisions and serious medical care here, not something you can manage on a cafeteria worker's salary of $12 an hour. Proper cardiac care requires professional facilities and trained staff and equipment. You can't provide in your little apartment. You need to understand your limitations and let us handle this situation appropriately." As if I'd just prop mom up on my couch with some chicken nuggets and call it comprehensive medical care, as if I was too stupid to understand what cardiac rehabilitation actually required. As if my 17 years of working and building and planning somehow didn't count because they'd decided long ago who I was and what I was capable of. That weekend, I did something that would change everything. Something that would shatter their comfortable assumptions and force them to see me clearly for the first time in their lives. Something that would make them regret every dismissive comment and every condescending remark and every moment they'd spent underestimating me. I spent Saturday and Sunday driving around looking at houses that would be suitable for mom's recovery. Proper houses with space and accessibility and everything needed for comprehensive care. And I found this perfect ranch-style home with wide hallways and a main-floor master bedroom with an attached bathroom. Exactly the kind of setup that would make mom's recovery easier and safer and more comfortable. The house had been on the market for 3 weeks and the sellers were motivated. And I put in a cash offer, $32,000 over the asking price, to make sure mine was the offer they'd accept. And I didn't even blink at the number because I had the money sitting in my business account just waiting for the right opportunity. Just waiting for a moment like this when I could prove to myself and everyone else that I'd built something real and substantial and meaningful. While my sisters spent their time arguing in group chats about which depressing nursing facility would be cheapest and most convenient for their visiting schedules, having detailed discussions about insurance coverage and Medicare limitations, and how to split the costs fairly among themselves, I hired contractors to install professional-grade grab bars and a roll-in shower system and a hospital bed that could be adjusted for optimal comfort and safety. I interviewed 7 different home health agencies until I found the perfect team. People who were experienced and compassionate and understood exactly what mom would need during her recovery. People who came with stellar references and years of experience in cardiac rehabilitation, and I hired them without even discussing the cost, because mom's care was worth whatever it took. I researched cardiac rehabilitation equipment and ordered everything from resistance bands to monitoring systems to the special chair that would help her strengthen her heart safely. And I did all of this while my sisters were still debating whether to visit the first nursing home on their list or wait until they had time to compare multiple facilities. I moved mom into her new house exactly 4 weeks after her heart attack, just as she was being discharged from the rehabilitation facility where she'd spent 2 weeks after her hospital stay. And I didn't tell anyone what I'd planned or what I'd arranged. I just showed up at the facility with the medical transport van I'd scheduled and paid for weeks in advance. Catherine was there arguing with the discharge coordinator about temporary placement options, waving printed lists of facilities and questioning every detail of the discharge plan. And I walked right past her to mom's room and started gathering her belongings. "It's all handled," I said calmly while signing the discharge papers with the pen the coordinator handed me. "Mom's coming home with me today. Everything's arranged and ready." Jennifer laughed. That same sharp, bitter laugh she'd perfected over years of putting people down. And she said loud enough for the entire nurses' station to hear, "Sarah, stop this embarrassing performance right now. You can barely afford to keep yourself housed and fed. This is beyond delusional. You can't provide the level of care that Mom needs. You're going to get yourself and Mom into a situation that none of us can fix when reality inevitably hits you." My youngest sister, Amanda, finally spoke up from where she'd been checking her phone in the corner, her voice dripping with that special condescension that lawyers seem to learn in school. She said, "Let her try and fail spectacularly. It'll be a good learning experience. She'll come begging us for help in less than a week when she realizes that good intentions don't pay medical bills or provide professional care. And maybe then she'll finally understand why we made the decisions we made without including her." 7 months passed after that day at the rehabilitation facility. 7 months of proving every single one of their assumptions wrong. 7 months of taking care of Mom while simultaneously running my business and working my shifts at the school cafeteria, and my sisters barely visited despite living less than 30 minutes away from Mom's new house. Catherine claimed her surgical schedule was too demanding, and she couldn't find time between procedures and consultations. Jennifer said she was overwhelmed with cases at her law firm, and the commute would cut into her billable hours. And Amanda just stopped responding to my texts altogether, letting my messages sit there unread for days before sending brief, dismissive replies that told me nothing about her life or her thoughts, or whether she cared at all about Mom's recovery. They kept their group chat going without me, though. I knew because Mom would occasionally mention their conversations about long-term care options and financial planning. Like they were still waiting for me to fail dramatically, so they could swoop in and say they'd been right all along about my limitations and my inability to handle real responsibility. But then something absolutely beautiful happened. Something that started the unraveling of all their carefully constructed narratives about my life and my capabilities. And it came in the form of something so simple, yet so devastating to their worldview. Catherine's husband, Marcus, this usually quiet man who worked in commercial real estate and rarely said anything controversial at family gatherings, he saw my name on the speaker list at a hospitality industry conference. Displayed on this enormous digital board in the convention center lobby, it read, "Sarah Chen, transforming struggling properties into profit centers." And the letters were big and bold and impossible to miss. And he was there for some real estate development seminar happening in the same building. And he stood there staring at my name for probably 5 full minutes, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what his wife had told him about my life. About my limitations and my lack of ambition and my contentment with serving lunch to middle schoolers. He took a photo of that board with his phone. The kind of photo where you can see his thumb partially blocking the corner because he was so rushed and flustered. And he sent it directly to the family group chat that still didn't include me. The chat where they'd spent months discussing my inadequacies and my financial limitations, and how they were carrying the burden of family responsibility while I coasted through life in my comfortable mediocrity. He added just 3 question marks to the image. No explanation, no context. Just those 3 punctuation marks that said everything about his confusion and disbelief. And then he sat back and watched his phone explode with responses. I was sitting with Mom in her sunroom when my phone started going absolutely crazy, just vibrating nonstop on the side table where I'd left it while I helped Mom with her morning exercises, the ones the physical therapist had prescribed to strengthen her heart and improve her mobility. And at first I ignored it because Mom's health was more important than whatever drama my sisters were creating now. But then Mom noticed the constant buzzing and nodded toward the phone with this knowing look in her eyes that told me she suspected something major was happening. I picked it up to find 37 text messages and 19 missed calls, and my voicemail was completely full, which had never happened before in my entire life. And the first message I actually opened and read was from Jennifer. And it was just 2 words in all capital letters, "Pathological liar." And then another message came through while I was staring at the first one. This one longer and more detailed and so filled with rage that I could practically feel her shaking while she typed it. The message said, "How dare you hide this from all of us while we worried ourselves sick about Mom's care costs and medical expenses and long-term planning? How dare you let us stress and struggle and sacrifice while you were sitting on a secret fortune? How dare you make us look like fools to our spouses and friends and colleagues? You've been lying to this family for years, and we trusted you and believed in you and tried to help you despite your limitations. And now we find out it was all an act, all a manipulation, all a sick game you were playing while we genuinely tried to support you and include you in family decisions. I set my phone down on the table and focused on finishing Mom's exercises, keeping my movements steady and calm even though my hands wanted to shake with anger and vindication, and this strange mixture of triumph and sadness that I couldn't quite name. And Mom reached over with her stronger hand and squeezed my wrist, her eyes telling me without words that she was proud of me for staying composed, for not letting them pull me into their drama and chaos. The phone started ringing, Catherine's name flashing on the screen insistently, and I answered it on speaker while adjusting Mom's exercise band, wanting her to hear whatever accusations were about to come flying through that phone, knowing she deserved to understand exactly how her daughters treated each other when they thought nobody was watching or listening or caring about the consequences of their words. Fraud. Catherine's voice exploded through the speaker so loud that Mom actually flinched in her chair. Identity theft and corporate deception and tax evasion and probably a dozen other crimes I haven't even thought of yet. I have attorney friends, Sarah, serious people who handle serious legal matters. And this charade you've been running ends right now. Today. Immediately. Before you damage this family's reputation any further with your schemes and your lies and your manipulation. Mom's eyes grew wide and she gripped her exercise band tighter, her knuckles turning white with the pressure. And I could see her processing this new information about her daughters, about the family dynamics she'd either missed or ignored for years, about the reality of how her children actually treated each other when they thought they were alone. I kept my voice absolutely level, channeling 17 years of dealing with difficult people and impossible situations and maintaining my composure when everything inside me wanted to scream. And I said calmly, I never lied to anyone in this family. Catherine, I simply never corrected your assumptions about my life and my income and my capabilities. You all built this narrative about who I was without ever asking me directly or showing any genuine interest in my actual life. And I let you believe what you wanted to believe because it was easier than constantly defending myself against your judgment and your condescension and your absolute certainty that you knew everything about everyone. She continued raging through the speaker, her voice getting higher and more frantic with each accusation. You let us think you were poor and struggling. You watched us stress about Mom's care costs while you were sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm going to expose you, Sarah. I'm going to tell everyone at Jefferson Middle School exactly what kind of person you really are. They deserve to know that their cafeteria worker is a con artist and a liar, and someone who manipulates her own family for some twisted psychological satisfaction. The line went dead, and Mom's breakfast sat untouched on her tray, her face showing more alertness and engagement than I'd seen since her heart attack. Like this drama had somehow shocked her system into paying closer attention to everything happening around her. And I could see her mentally reviewing years of family interactions through this new lens of information. A knock at the front door interrupted the heavy silence that had fallen over the sunroom, and I found Mrs. Park from 2 houses down standing on the porch holding a ceramic dish and wearing this concerned expression that told me she'd probably heard some of the shouting through my open windows. I heard raised voices, she said gently, glancing past me toward where Mom sat in her wheelchair in the sunroom, and I wanted to make sure everything was all right. I brought some extra kimchi stew from last night's dinner. I know how much your mother enjoyed it last time I brought some over. Mrs. Park had been bringing meals twice a week ever since Mom moved in, refusing any payment and always staying to chat with Mom about their shared love of old Korean dramas and gardening shows. And she'd watched me dedicate myself completely to Mom's care, often commenting on the professional medical equipment and the modifications I'd made to make the house safer and more comfortable for someone recovering from cardiac issues. This is just family drama, I admitted to her while accepting the still warm dish. Nothing that affects Mom's care or safety. Just my sisters having feelings about some information they recently discovered about my life. But we're managing fine and Mom's recovery is still on track. Mrs. Park patted my shoulder with her free hand, her eyes soft with understanding, and she said, Your mother is so fortunate to have you. I tell my own daughter all the time that she should be as devoted as you are. Not many children would sacrifice their own comfort and convenience to provide this level of care to their parents. Most people just find the nearest facility and visit occasionally and tell themselves they're doing their best. After she left, my phone showed a new text message from Jennifer that simply said, I'm coming over right now. You will explain yourself and answer for what you've done to this family. and I knew from the tone that she was already in her car heading this direction, probably breaking speed limits and running yellow lights in her fury to confront me about my supposed deception. I helped Mom finish her breakfast while we waited for the inevitable confrontation, and I started mentally preparing for what was coming, knowing that my sisters would likely all descend on the house together like they always did when they wanted to present a united front against me. When they wanted to use their numbers and their confidence and their absolute certainty in their own righteousness to overwhelm whatever defense I might try to mount. While I was gathering Mom's medication for her mid-morning dose, a car door slammed outside with enough force to make the windows rattle, and then another car pulled up behind the first one, and I heard raised voices in the driveway even before anyone reached the front door. My sisters already arguing among themselves about the best approach to handle this situation. The best way to extract answers and explanations and probably apologies for daring to be more successful than they'd imagined possible. Jennifer's fist pounded against my front door. "Open up, Sarah. We're not leaving until you explain this sick joke you've been playing on your own family. This twisted game you've been running while we genuinely worried about you and tried to include you despite your obvious limitations." And through the window, I could see Amanda's car pulling up behind Catherine's luxury SUV. All three of my sisters converging on my house like a coordinated attack force. And I took a deep breath and opened the door to find them clustered on the porch looking like they'd dressed for battle in their expensive work clothes and perfect makeup and designer handbags. Amanda was holding her phone up recording, declaring loudly for the camera, "We're documenting this for evidence in case we need it for legal proceedings. In case Sarah has committed fraud or identity theft or misrepresented herself in ways that could have legal consequences, we want everything on record." They pushed past me without being invited inside, Jennifer leading the charge into my living room like she owned the place, and their eyes swept over everything I'd set up for Mom's care. The hospital bed positioned near the window for natural light, the ceiling-mounted lift system I'd had professionally installed to help with transfers, the rows upon rows of medical supplies organized on custom shelving that I'd had built specifically for this purpose, everything labeled and categorized and easily accessible. And I watched their faces as they took in the professional-grade equipment that cost thousands of dollars, equipment that spoke to resources they hadn't known I possessed. Catherine stopped at the bathroom doorway and just stared at the roll-in shower with its professional-grade grab bars and the built-in shower seat and the handheld shower head and the non-slip flooring and all the other modifications I'd made to ensure Mom could shower safely and independently as she recovered her strength. And Catherine's face showed this mixture of confusion and something that might have been grudging respect, before her expression hardened again into anger. "This must have cost an absolute fortune," Jennifer said, finishing her inspection of the living room and spinning toward the kitchen where I'd set up my small home office in the corner. And her gaze landed on my desk where business cards and client contracts lay scattered from yesterday's video conference with a hotel chain in Phoenix, and she snatched up one of my business cards and read it aloud with this tone of absolute disbelief. "Sarah Chen, CEO and founder, Chen Hospitality Solutions," and her face drained of all color as the reality of the situation finally penetrated through her anger and her assumptions. "CEO," she repeated, like the word was foreign to her, like she couldn't quite process what it meant in connection with her younger sister who served lunch to middle schoolers. Catherine's tactics shifted immediately the way they always did when she realized direct confrontation wasn't working, and she said in this calculating tone that I recognized from childhood, "Obviously, this is a scam of some kind. You've been defrauding vulnerable hotel owners and restaurant operators, haven't you? Taking advantage of struggling businesses during difficult economic times, charging them enormous fees for advice that probably makes their situations worse. This is probably illegal in multiple ways, and we need to report it to the proper authorities before you hurt more people." The doorbell rang right in the middle of her accusation, and Mom's physical therapist, Catherine, had arrived exactly on schedule the way she did every Tuesday and Thursday morning. And I let her in and watched my sisters step aside awkwardly as Catherine wheeled her professional equipment past them into the sunroom, completely unfazed by the obvious family drama happening in the middle of her patient's house. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Catherine called cheerfully toward where Mom sat in her wheelchair, ready to work on strengthening those legs today. "We're going to try some new exercises that should help with your balance and coordination." And while Catherine got Mom positioned for the therapy session, I pulled out my laptop from my desk and opened my business banking portal. entering my password while my sisters watched with these expressions that were equal parts disbelief and fury and something that might have been envy. The screen loaded, showing my current balance and my recent transaction history. And Amanda whispered, "That's 7 figures." Her voice barely audible as she leaned closer to see the screen better. "Jennifer, Catherine, do you see this? She has over $1 million sitting in her business account right now. This very moment, while we've been struggling and stressing and sacrificing to help with family expenses. I never asked any of you for money." I interrupted their shocked whispers. Never complained about being broke or struggling financially. Never requested loans or handouts or assistance of any kind. You all just assumed based on my job at the school that I must be poor and desperate. And I never corrected those assumptions. Because honestly, it was easier to let you think what you wanted than to constantly defend my choices and my lifestyle and my priorities to people who'd already decided they knew everything about me. Jennifer's phone was already at her ear before I finished speaking, and she said urgently, Aunt Patricia, you need to hear this immediately. Sarah's been lying to all of us for years. She's actually wealthy. She's been hiding massive amounts of money while we've been killing ourselves trying to figure out how to pay for Mom's care and coordinate her medical expenses. I pulled up our old family group chat on my phone, the one they'd created without me when Mom had her heart attack. And I scrolled through months and months of messages I'd never been included in. Messages where they discussed me like I was a child or an incompetent or someone who needed to be managed and controlled for their own good. And there it was in black and white. Their careful calculations of what my contribution to Mom's care should be based on their assumptions about my income. Based on her hourly wage at the school, Catherine had written about 8 months ago. Sarah can realistically contribute maybe $85 monthly toward Mom's ongoing care costs. We need to be realistic about her financial limitations and not put pressure on her that she can't handle. That seems high. Considering her rent situation, Jennifer had responded immediately. She lives in that terrible apartment near the bus depot that probably costs at least $800 a month. I'd say $60 maximum is what we can expect from someone in her financial position without causing her undue hardship. Amanda had agreed with Jennifer's assessment, writing, "We definitely can't expect more from someone working in a school cafeteria. She's probably living paycheck to paycheck already. $60 is probably stretching her budget to the breaking point. We shouldn't make her feel bad about her limitations or her choices, even if we don't understand why she settled for such a limited life." I showed them the screen, holding my phone up so they could all read their own words, their own calculations, their own dismissive assessments of my worth and my capabilities. And I said quietly, "This is what you thought I was worth to this family. $60 a month toward our mother's care. This is how little you valued my contribution or my potential or my ability to help in meaningful ways." The family meeting that nobody actually asked for just turned into a surprise episode of Guess Who's Actually Rich. And watching 3 successful professional women discover their supposedly poor sister makes more money than all of them combined is giving me this secondhand satisfaction I didn't even know I needed. This validation that years of being underestimated and dismissed actually meant something, actually proved something about their judgment and their assumptions and their absolute certainty about knowing who I was. $60 toward Mom's care, I repeated, letting that number hang in the air between us. That's what you calculated I could contribute based on your assumptions about my life and my salary and my limitations, and you never once thought to ask me directly what I could actually afford or what resources I actually had access to. You just decided among yourselves what kind of person I was and what kind of life I was living and what kind of help I could realistically provide. Catherine grabbed her phone and started taking screenshots of everything in the room. The medical equipment, the professional modifications, even the framed certificates on the wall from industry conferences where I'd been a featured speaker. And within seconds, she'd sent everything to our extended family group chat. The one that included aunts and uncles and cousins, with a caption that read, "Our millionaire sister who's been playing poor for years while the rest of us struggled to handle family responsibilities like adults." My phone started ringing immediately. The principal of Jefferson Middle School calling during what should have been her planning period. And I answered while my sisters watched with these expressions that clearly hoped I was about to get fired or exposed or humiliated in some professional capacity. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice came through warm and concerned. "Sarah, I'm receiving multiple phone calls about some kind of family emergency involving you. Your sister Catherine called and said you needed to be pulled from your shift immediately for urgent personal matters. She made it sound quite serious, and I wanted to make sure you're all right and see if you need time off to handle whatever situation is happening with your family. There's absolutely no emergency, I assured her calmly. I'll be there for lunch service as scheduled. This is just my family having some feelings about information they recently discovered about my personal life. Nothing that affects my job performance or my ability to work my shifts or my commitment to the students who depend on reliable meal service. Oh, good, Mrs. Rodriguez said with obvious relief. You know we really can't function properly without you. The students ask for you when you're not there, and the other staff struggle to maintain the efficiency and organization you bring to every shift. But Sarah, I do need to ask, is everything truly okay at home? Your sister Jennifer also called, sounding quite upset and making some concerning allegations about financial irregularities. And while I assured her that your personal life is your own business, I wanted to make sure there wasn't something the school should be aware of. After I hung up with Mrs. Rodriguez, another call came through immediately, this time from my district supervisor at the central office, and I knew my sisters had escalated their campaign to destroy my credibility beyond just family drama. Sarah, the supervisor said in this carefully neutral administrative voice, I just received a concerning complaint call about potential financial irregularities involving one of our employees. Someone claiming to be your family member said you've been involved in fraudulent business activities. And while we don't normally investigate employees' private business ventures, when allegations of fraud are made, we have to at least document them and look into whether there's any connection to your employment with the district. Catherine continued working with Mom through all of this chaos, professionally ignoring the family drama unfolding around her patient, while she guided Mom through leg lifts and balance exercises, and Mom's eyes tracked between her daughters, taking in every word and every accusation and every defensive response. Watching her family implode over secrets and assumptions and years of resentment finally bubbling to the surface, Jennifer didn't even try to look ashamed about calling my workplace. She actually lifted her chin defiantly when I glanced at her after hanging up with the district supervisor, and she said, People deserve to know who they're trusting with their children's food and safety. If you've been running some kind of fraudulent business operation, then parents have a right to know what kind of person is serving their kids lunch every day, and potentially exposing the school to liability issues. I closed my laptop carefully, taking my time to shut it down properly and put it back in my desk drawer. And I said quietly, I need to go see Aunt Patricia. She deserves to hear the truth directly from me rather than from Jennifer's hysterical phone calls, and Catherine's screenshots taken out of context, and Amanda's recordings that make me look like a villain. We're not done with this conversation, Catherine warned, her voice carrying that authoritative doctor tone she used when she wanted people to obey her without question. You don't get to just walk away from this situation after lying to your family for nearly 2 decades. We deserve answers and explanations and probably apologies for the stress and worry you've caused all of us. But I was already grabbing my keys from the hook near the door, my purse from the chair where I'd left it, leaving them standing in my house with Mom and Catherine, trusting the physical therapist to handle things professionally until I returned, and having faith that Mom would be safe with someone trained in cardiac care, even if my sister's presence made the atmosphere uncomfortable and tense. Aunt Patricia's apartment was 27 minutes away in light traffic, a drive I'd made hundreds of times over the years whenever I needed advice or perspective or just someone to talk to who wasn't wrapped up in the competitive dynamics of my immediate family, and I found her sitting at her kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. Jennifer's version of events having already done its damage through multiple phone calls and text messages filled with partial truths and complete exaggerations. How could you do this? Aunt Patricia asked before I'd even fully entered her apartment. How could you let us all worry and stress like this while you were secretly wealthy the whole time? How could you watch your sisters struggle to coordinate care for their mother while you sat on resources that could have made everything easier for everyone? I pulled out my phone and accessed 7 years of corporate tax returns that my accountant had filed, returns that showed steady business growth and legitimate income and proper tax payments on every dollar I'd earned, and I set the phone on her kitchen table right in front of her, watching her eyes widen as she scrolled through document after document that proved this wasn't a scam or fraud or some scheme I'd cooked up to deceive people. You paid more in federal taxes last year than Catherine makes in her entire surgical salary. She whispered in absolute disbelief, her finger hovering over the screen as she tried to process the numbers she was seeing. And that doesn't even count state taxes and self-employment taxes and all the other taxes that business owners have to pay. I built this business from absolutely nothing while everyone in the family thought I was failing at life, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her at the kitchen table. Started with just a laptop and determination and skills that everyone mocked me for having. Skills they thought were beneath me or limiting me or holding me back from real success. And I turned those skills into something substantial and meaningful and profitable by working harder than anyone knew and sacrificing more than anyone saw, and believing in myself when nobody else did. My phone started buzzing with text messages from restaurant clients who'd apparently received calls from my sisters. "Hey, Sarah, got a really weird call from someone claiming to be your sister asking questions about your business practices. Everything okay on your end? Just wanted to check in and make sure you're all right and see if you need anything from us." Jennifer had found my conference speaker biography online, the public information that listed my accomplishments and credentials and client testimonials, and she was apparently using that information as ammunition to contact every professional connection she could find, trying to plant seeds of doubt about my integrity and my business practices and my honesty. Another text came through, this one from Mrs. Park. "Someone was taking pictures of your house this morning when I was leaving for my grocery shopping. Looked like they were documenting the outside and maybe trying to see through windows. Thought you should know in case you want to call the police or file a report or something." Then a text from Catherine. "Your sister Catherine tried to question me about your real job during our session today, asking leading questions about what you do for work and how you afford Mom's care, and whether I'd noticed anything suspicious about the situation. I told her absolutely nothing except that your mother is receiving excellent care and making remarkable progress. But I wanted you to be aware that they're trying to gather information from the people in your life who might have knowledge about your actual circumstances." I showed Aunt Patricia all the messages, one by one, letting her see exactly what my sisters were doing in their rage and hurt and confusion. How they were trying to destroy what I'd built because they couldn't handle being wrong about me for so many years, because they couldn't accept that their assumptions had been completely incorrect and their certainty about my limitations had been totally misplaced. A new notification popped up on my phone while Aunt Patricia was reading through the messages. A new review on my business's Google page that had been posted just minutes ago from an anonymous account that I didn't recognize. And my stomach dropped when I read it because I knew immediately who was behind it. The review said, "Dishonest with own family and cannot be trusted with business relationships. If she'll lie and manipulate her own sisters for years, then what else is she hiding from clients? Would not recommend hiring someone with such serious character and integrity issues. 0 stars. My biggest client called before I could even process the implications of that review. His voice concerned but professional. "Sarah, I'm looking at this review that just appeared on your business page, and I wanted to reach out immediately to understand what's happening. This doesn't match anything about the person I've worked with for the past 6 years, or the results you've delivered consistently for my properties." I explained the situation as briefly and professionally as I could without going into too much family drama detail, keeping my voice steady and factual, even though inside I was shaking with anger and hurt, and this deep sadness that my own sisters would actually try to destroy my professional reputation just because they were angry about being wrong. He listened to my explanation without interrupting, and then he said firmly, "I'm going to post our detailed testimonial on every platform I can find today. Anyone who saved 3 of my hotels from bankruptcy and increased revenue across all my properties by an average of 43% over 5 years deserves better than this kind of attack. And I'm going to make sure potential clients know exactly what kind of person you are and what kind of results you deliver." By the time I drove back home through afternoon traffic, my sisters had left the house and Mom was resting comfortably in her bedroom after her therapy session, and Catherine was finishing her documentation at the kitchen table. 47% improvement in range of motion compared to last month's assessment, she reported, looking up from her tablet where she was entering notes. And her cardiovascular endurance is exceeding every benchmark we set at the beginning of her recovery. Whatever you're doing in terms of consistency and routine and emotional support, keep doing it because the results are frankly remarkable for someone who had such a severe cardiac event. After Catherine left, I sat with Mom in her bedroom as she rested from the morning's exertions, and my phone continued its relentless assault of notifications, Uncle Marcus asking if I actually needed bail money because Catherine had told him I might be arrested for fraud. Former classmates from high school questioning what was happening based on cryptic social media posts. More clients reaching out with concern after receiving strange calls from people claiming to be investigating my business practices. But Mom's hand found mine where I sat beside her bed, her grip stronger than it had been in months, squeezing with real force and intention. And her eyes met mine with this look of absolute understanding and pride that I hadn't seen since before her heart attack. Since before this whole nightmare situation started with secret group chats and excluded conversations and assumptions about my limitations. I squeezed back, holding her hand carefully but firmly, and I said, "We're okay, Mom. We're going to be fine no matter what they do or say or try to destroy. Let them rage and rant and make fools of themselves. We know the truth. And that's what matters. We know who we are and what we've built together, and nothing they say can take that away from us." The next morning brought a fresh wave of attacks that were somehow even more vicious than the day before, as my sisters had apparently spent the entire night coordinating their strategy and planning their next moves. Jennifer's Facebook posts about family betrayal and wolves in sheep's clothing and people who hide their true nature behind false modesty had gained serious traction overnight, shared by mutual friends and commented on by people who didn't even know me. Strangers weighing in on my character based on Jennifer's carefully crafted narrative that painted me as a manipulative liar who deceived her loving family for nearly 2 decades. I took screenshots of everything. The posts calling me mentally unstable and sociopathic. The comments from people who'd never met me weighing in confidently about my character and my motives and my obvious psychological problems. All evidence that I might need later if this situation escalated into actual legal action, or if I needed to defend myself against defamation claims. At work, serving lunch to 700 middle school students, the whispers among parent volunteers in the cafeteria were impossible to ignore. Some people stared at me with curiosity, and others avoided eye contact completely. But Maria, who'd worked beside me for 9 years, stood absolutely firm in her support. "Anyone who believes that garbage online doesn't know you at all," she said loudly enough for everyone in the serving line to hear. 17 years you've been here, never missing a single day, treating these kids like they matter, learning their names and their preferences and their dietary restrictions, remembering whose birthday it is and who just lost a grandparent and who's struggling at home. That's who you really are. And nobody's social media posts can change that truth. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped by during the lunch service rush, navigating carefully through the crowded cafeteria to reach the serving counter where I was portioning pasta onto trays, and she pulled me aside briefly during a lull between lunch periods. "HR wants to meet with you this afternoon about financial disclosure concerns and potential conflicts of interest," she said quietly, her expression apologetic but professional. I told them I thought it was completely ridiculous and invasive, but they have protocols they're required to follow when allegations are made. "So can you come by the district office at 4 o'clock today?" "I understand completely," I told her, continuing to serve food with steady hands and a genuine smile. "And I appreciate you standing up for me even when you're required to follow administrative procedures. I'll be there at 4, and I'll bring whatever documentation they need to see that I've done nothing wrong or unethical." That evening, I installed professional security cameras around Mom's house. Those high-quality systems with night vision and motion detection and cloud storage that would capture everything happening on the property. Because the garbage cans had been moved 3 times in 2 days, and all the business promotional materials I kept in my car for networking events had vanished sometime during the night, and someone was clearly escalating beyond angry texts and social media posts into actual real-world harassment that could potentially become dangerous. Mom watched from her wheelchair as I mounted the cameras on the corners of the house and positioned them to cover the driveway and front porch and backyard, and she managed to say in her still-recovering voice that was getting stronger every day, "Smart girl, good thinking, protect yourself." 5 restaurant owners called that same night, each one independently offering to write detailed letters to the school board about my integrity and my character and the concrete results I'd delivered for their businesses over the years. The owner of Castellanos, this upscale Italian place that happened to be the school board president's favorite restaurant where he took his wife for their anniversary every year, was particularly insistent about making his voice heard. He told me in this passionate voice that I'll never forget, You saved my family's business from bankruptcy back in 2019 when we were literally 3 weeks away from closing our doors forever. You restructured our entire operation from kitchen workflows to menu pricing to supplier negotiations. And I want the school board to know exactly who Sarah Chen really is and what she's capable of achieving when she commits to helping someone. Maria organized the entire cafeteria staff without my knowledge or permission. She quietly coordinated with all my coworkers to ensure they'd cover my duties whenever I needed to handle family emergencies or deal with the ongoing harassment campaign. And Mrs. Rodriguez noticed this incredible teamwork and loyalty, commenting during a staff meeting about how remarkable it was that I'd inspired such dedication among my colleagues, despite working what everyone assumed was just a simple cafeteria job. The principal's observation meant more to me than she probably realized, because it showed that people who actually worked with me daily, people who saw how I treated others and how I handled responsibilities and how I showed up consistently year after year, those people knew the truth about my character in ways my sisters never bothered to discover. Catherine reported Mom's best progress yet during the next morning's therapy session, telling me that Mom's cardiovascular recovery was actually exceeding all the standard medical expectations for someone who'd experienced such a severe cardiac event. And she attributed this remarkable progress directly to the stable home environment and consistent care routine and emotional support that I'd created in this house. Mom's range of motion had improved another 18% compared to the previous month's assessment. Her endurance had increased dramatically, and her mental acuity was sharper than it had been before the heart attack. Like the combination of proper care and reduced stress had actually reversed some of the cognitive decline that often accompanies major cardiac events in older patients. I started documenting everything systematically, keeping detailed records of every harassment attempt and every professional attack and every attempt to damage my reputation, knowing I might need this evidence later if the situation escalated to legal action, or if I needed to defend myself against formal allegations, or if my sister's campaign actually succeeded in causing real professional damage that required me to prove what had actually happened. I continued serving lunch to middle school students every single day, while simultaneously managing client video conferences between shifts. My phone stayed on silent mode in my pocket during serving hours, but I could feel it vibrating constantly with new messages and calls and notifications that I'd address later when I wasn't responsible for feeding 700 hungry 12 and 13-year-olds who depended on reliable meal service. The ability to compartmentalize that I'd developed over nearly 2 decades of running a business while working full-time served me incredibly well during this crisis period, because I could be professional Sarah dealing with hotel executives at 3 p.m. and then immediately switch to cafeteria. Sarah serving chocolate milk and chicken nuggets to students who called me Miss Sarah and told me about their weekend soccer games and showed me pictures they'd drawn in art class. Catherine confronted me in the grocery store parking lot one evening when I'd just finished shopping for Mom's special cardiac diet that required careful attention to sodium levels and fat content and portion sizes. And I'd loaded all the groceries into my car trunk when Catherine suddenly appeared beside my vehicle, like she'd been waiting there watching for me. I calmly pulled out my phone without saying a word and started recording the interaction, holding the phone up, obviously, so Catherine could see that I was documenting everything, making it crystal clear that whatever she said or did would be captured on video that I could use later if necessary. And this visible recording seemed to throw her off balance because she'd clearly planned some dramatic confrontation that would be more difficult to execute knowing her words were being preserved. She started ranting anyway, her voice shaking with emotion and fury, about betrayal and deception and how I'd manipulated the entire family for years while pretending to be someone I wasn't. And I just kept loading my groceries methodically while she spoke, not interrupting or defending myself, just letting her exhaust herself with accusations while the camera recorded every word. Then something completely unexpected happened right in the middle of Catherine's rant, something that changed the entire tone of the confrontation in a way I never could have anticipated. Her voice cracked suddenly, and she admitted in this small, broken voice that she'd always been jealous of me, that watching me be content with less had made her feel inadequate about her own constant striving for more, that my apparent happiness serving lunch to middle schoolers had somehow highlighted her own unhappiness despite all her professional success and financial achievements and prestigious position in the medical community. The admission seemed to shock Catherine as much as it shocked me, like the words had escaped before she could stop them, and she quickly tried to cover this vulnerable moment with more anger and more accusations. But the truth had already slipped out, and we both knew it. We both heard it hanging in the air between us like something we could never take back or pretend hadn't been said. The local business journal editor called me the very next morning, explaining that they'd heard about my story through the restaurant association and multiple business owners who'd reached out to recommend me as a feature subject. And they wanted to write a piece about my unusual career path for their monthly success stories column that highlighted entrepreneurs who'd built businesses in non-traditional ways. I agreed to the interview immediately, seeing it as an opportunity to control the narrative and tell my story in my own words rather than letting my sister's distorted version be the only information available to the public. And we scheduled a 2-hour interview at a coffee shop where I could speak freely about my journey without family members interrupting or contradicting or trying to reframe my experiences. Ashley visited that same afternoon while Amanda was at work handling some big case at her law firm. And Ashley appeared at Mom's front door looking deeply uncomfortable, but absolutely determined to have this conversation. And she apologized sincerely for Amanda's behavior and for her own initial reaction to the revelations about my business. We sat in Mom's kitchen while Mom napped in her bedroom recovering from her morning therapy session, and Ashley shared her perspective on the family dynamics that I'd never fully understood from my position in the middle of all the dysfunction. And she explained how Amanda had always followed our older sister's lead without questioning their judgments or their assumptions, and how Ashley herself had been kept mostly in the dark about the depth of the resentment and competition that had poisoned the relationships between the sisters. Aunt Patricia finally saw the complete family group chat history when I showed her my phone during my next visit. Scrolling through literally months and months of messages where my sisters had systematically discussed my limitations and realistic expectations for someone in my position and how to manage the situation without making me feel bad about my inability to contribute meaningfully to family responsibilities. Her hands actually shook as she handed back my phone. The evidence of how my sisters had excluded me and diminished me and talked about me like I was a child who needed to be managed was absolutely undeniable and impossible to explain away or reframe as anything other than what it was, which was sustained disrespect and dismissal that had gone on for years while I'd been completely unaware. My business clients organized an appreciation dinner without telling me anything about it. I arrived at what I genuinely believed was a routine consultation meeting at one of my longtime clients' restaurants, only to find 23 restaurant and hotel owners gathered in a private dining room to show their support and share testimonials about how my work had impacted their businesses and sometimes literally saved their livelihoods. They'd each prepared statements about specific ways I'd helped them, from the restaurant owner who'd been facing foreclosure before I restructured his operations to the hotel manager whose property had been ranked worst in the chain before I redesigned their guest experience systems, and the gesture overwhelmed me far more than any of my sister's attacks had hurt me, because these were people who actually knew my work and had seen concrete results and were willing to publicly vouch for my integrity. Catherine saw my car parked outside this upscale restaurant while she was driving past on her way home from the hospital after a long surgical shift, and she apparently decided to stop and confront me again because she came storming into the restaurant, pushing past the hostess who tried to explain that this was a private event, barging into the dining room to find me surrounded by successful business owners who were literally toasting my accomplishments and sharing stories about my professionalism. She started accusing me loudly of flaunting my wealth while our family struggled to coordinate Mom's care, completely oblivious to the fact that Mom was actually receiving better care than any facility could have provided, and that nobody in the family was struggling with anything except their own hurt pride and wounded egos. The entire room fell completely silent as Catherine revealed far more about herself than about me through her angry tirade, and my clients watched in stunned disbelief as this well-dressed professional woman melted down in public over her sister's success, and the owner of the restaurant personally escorted Catherine out through the kitchen to avoid causing more of a scene in front of other diners. Several clients approached me afterward with their own stories of family members who'd resented their success or felt threatened by their achievements. And the incident actually strengthened our professional relationships because they'd seen me handle a difficult personal situation with grace and composure. And they respected how I'd managed to keep my personal drama separate from my professional life for so many years. 4 families from Jefferson Middle School reached out with messages of support after they'd heard the real truth about my situation from restaurant owners in our small community who'd connected the dots between the cafeteria worker at their kids' school and the consultant who'd transformed their businesses. One parent told me their family's restaurant existed today specifically because of my consultation 4 years ago, that their children attended the school where I served lunch, and they wanted me to know they stood firmly behind me regardless of what my family was saying about me online or what allegations were being spread through gossip and social media. Jennifer's husband, Derek, sent an unexpected text message that caught me completely off guard because I'd assumed he was fully aligned with Jennifer's campaign against me. He apologized for the photograph that had started this entire avalanche of family drama, explaining that he hadn't known it would trigger this level of chaos and destruction, and the message was carefully worded in a way that suggested he was trying to distance himself from the situation without directly criticizing his wife, like he was testing the waters to see if there was some way to maintain a relationship with me, separate from Jennifer's vendetta. The text was brief and seemed almost cowardly in its vagueness, but it represented the first crack in the united front my sisters had presented. The first suggestion that maybe not everyone in the extended family agreed with the campaign to destroy my reputation and force me to apologize for succeeding in ways they hadn't anticipated. Aunt Patricia made a discovery that fundamentally changed her entire perspective on the situation and on my relationship with the family over the years. While going through old greeting cards and letters she'd saved in boxes in her closet, she found birthday and holiday cards that our father had written to me before he passed away 8 years ago. Cards I'd shared with her when I was going through my own grief about losing him. One card dated 6 years ago, right in the middle of when my sisters were actively mocking my cafeteria job at every family gathering, said in Dad's handwriting, "So proud of my entrepreneur daughter who's building something meaningful while staying true to her values." And another card from 7 years ago said, "My brilliant daughter, the business owner who never forgot where she came from or who she wanted to be." Dad had known all along about my business and my success and my double life. And he'd kept my secret because he understood why I wanted to stay quiet. Because he'd watched his daughters compete and compare and judge each other for decades, and he knew that my silence was protection rather than deception. I hired a professional security service to start patrolling the neighborhood around Mom's house beginning the following week, because I'd found Catherine parked outside the house 4 separate times over the span of 6 days, just sitting in her expensive SUV at the curb with the engine running, watching the house like she was conducting surveillance or gathering information, or maybe just trying to understand how I'd managed to create this life that she hadn't known existed. The behavior was technically legal since she was parked on a public street, but it felt unsettling and obsessive and potentially threatening. And the security company representative agreed that having random patrols would deter this kind of behavior and make Catherine think twice about continuing her surveillance activities. The entire cafeteria staff at Jefferson Middle School signed a letter supporting me and defending my character. Maria had organized the effort quietly without telling me, gathering signatures from everyone who'd worked with me over 17 years, including retired staff members who'd since moved away. And they'd all contributed brief testimonials about my work ethic and my dedication to the students and my integrity in every interaction. Even the head cook, who'd initially been skeptical about having a business owner working in her kitchen, had written, "Sarah treats this job with the same professionalism and commitment that she brings to her consulting work. And that level of consistency reveals true character that can't be faked for almost 2 decades." Jennifer's Facebook rants became increasingly unhinged over the next week, her posts growing longer and more rambling and filled with contradictions and accusations that didn't make logical sense even to people who wanted to believe her version of events. Mutual friends and extended family members began quietly distancing themselves from her online presence, and several people privately messaged me with apologies for initially believing the narrative she'd constructed without hearing my side of the story, or considering that there might be context they weren't aware of. The social media implosion that Jennifer was experiencing in real time was almost painful to watch, because I could see her destroying her own credibility with every new post that revealed more about her mental state than about my supposed deception. Mom achieved a remarkable milestone during her therapy session that reduced me to tears of joy and relief and pride. The social worker who visited for a routine check on Mom's care situation and recovery progress asked Mom to communicate her wishes about her living arrangement and her primary caregiver, and Mom picked up her communication board with hands that were steadier than they'd been in months. And she wrote in shaky but absolutely clear handwriting, "Sarah stays. My daughter takes care of me. I want to stay here with Sarah, who loves me." The social worker was genuinely impressed by the quality of care Mom was receiving, noting in her official report the professional equipment and the detailed care logs I maintained and the obvious improvement in Mom's physical and mental condition, and she told me directly that she wished every family caregiver showed this level of dedication and competence. The local business journal published their article about me with a headline that exceeded my expectations and told my story in a way that felt honest and complete. The headline read, "Middle School Cafeteria Worker Builds Six-Figure Consulting Empire." While serving students, and the piece highlighted my dedication to both roles and my commitment to staying grounded while building success. And the article included quotes from clients and colleagues and even some of the middle school students who talked about how Miss Sarah always remembered their names and their favorite foods and made lunch period feel welcoming even on their worst days. My phone absolutely exploded with congratulations from business contacts and industry connections who hadn't known about my cafeteria job. And many of them told me they respected me even more for maintaining that connection to service work while building a high-level consulting practice. I pulled out my employee handbook from the school district and looked at my attendance record that documented 17 years of perfect attendance with not a single sick day taken, despite building a business that required countless late nights and early mornings and weekend work sessions. The record spoke to a level of dedication that my sisters had never bothered to notice or acknowledge. This consistent showing up day after day, year after year that revealed more about my character than any amount of money in a bank account could ever demonstrate. Those 700 middle school students who depended on reliable meal service had never been let down, not once in 17 years. And that mattered to me more than my sister's approval ever could have mattered. Aunt Patricia's lease on her apartment expired 2 weeks later, and she asked if she could move in with me and Mom, admitting tearfully that she'd chosen the wrong team initially, and that she wanted to be part of our healing process rather than part of the ongoing drama that Catherine and Jennifer were perpetuating. I agreed immediately, recognizing this as an opportunity to rebuild family relationships with someone who was willing to see the truth and adjust their perspective, and knowing that Mom would benefit from having additional family support from someone who genuinely cared about her well-being, rather than someone who saw her care as a burden or an obligation. The Restaurant Association board member who'd served on several committees with me revealed something absolutely disturbing about the lengths my sisters were willing to go to damage my professional life. Jennifer had called the association trying to file a formal ethics complaint against my business, claiming I was operating without proper licenses and defrauding clients and using my consulting work as a front for some kind of financial scheme. And she'd demanded that the association investigate me and potentially revoke any credentials or memberships I held through their organization. The board member had dismissed the complaint immediately after checking my impeccable record and stellar reputation, but he wanted me to be aware that my sister had actually tried to destroy my professional standing with the industry organization that had recognized my work with multiple awards over the years. A scheduling conflict forced me to make a difficult choice that revealed everything about my priorities and my values, the kind of choice that defines who you really are when nobody's watching and judging. My keynote presentation at the National Hospitality Conference conflicted directly with Mom's important follow-up appointment with her cardiologist, an appointment that would determine her long-term prognosis and whether she'd need any additional interventions or medications, and I chose Mom without a moment's hesitation, asking the conference organizers if they could stream my presentation virtually instead of having me appear in person. The organizers agreed, and my message about balancing professional success with family priorities resonated even more powerfully with the virtual audience than an in-person presentation might have. And my willingness to prioritize caregiving over career advancement actually attracted several new high-value clients who appreciated my authentic approach to work-life integration. Catherine's medical practice partners approached her about the family situation after noticing that her behavior at work had become increasingly erratic and unprofessional. She'd been taking personal calls during patient consultations, leaving surgery prep meetings early to drive by my house and monitor my activities, and generally allowing her obsession with my revelation to affect her patient care and her professional relationships. The senior partners at her practice expressed serious concern about how this family drama was impacting her reputation and the practice's standing in the medical community, and they suggested she might benefit from taking some personal time to resolve whatever was happening in her family life before it caused irreparable professional damage. The school board meeting where they were supposed to address the allegations against me turned into something completely unexpected and remarkably vindicating. The HR investigation that I'd dreaded for weeks turned out to be pure formality, because the board president himself attended the meeting after hearing about my integrity from multiple restaurant owners, including the owner of his favorite restaurant where he celebrated every important family milestone. The board publicly apologized for the inconvenience of the investigation and commended my 17 years of dedicated service to the district. And they made it clear that having a successful business outside of work hours was not only permitted but actually admirable. And they wished more employees showed my level of commitment and work ethic. Amanda returned my spare house key in person one evening, appearing at Mom's door, shuffling her feet and avoiding eye contact like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong and was being forced to apologize against her will. She mumbled an apology that was barely audible, explaining that Ashley had made her come because Ashley was determined to maintain some kind of relationship with the functional members of the family. And Amanda admitted, without quite looking at me, that she'd just been following Catherine and Jennifer's lead without really thinking about whether they were right or wrong about the situation. The interaction was deeply awkward and uncomfortable for both of us, but it represented some kind of progress toward acknowledging reality and moving past the initial shock and anger that had consumed everyone. Jennifer sent what appeared to be her final desperate attempt at maintaining her narrative, a long, rambling text message that arrived at 2 a.m. and must have taken her an hour to compose. She claimed that I actually owed the family compensation for years of emotional support they'd provided, listing every perceived sacrifice and every moment of help they'd offered, and every time they'd included me in family activities, despite my obvious limitations and lack of contribution. The message was a masterpiece of delusion and revisionist history, painting herself as my long-suffering benefactor who'd carried me through life only to be betrayed by my secret success. And the disconnect from reality was so complete that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost felt compassion for someone who'd built such an elaborate false narrative that she'd started believing it herself. I responded to Jennifer's text with receipts, actual documented evidence of every dinner I'd quietly paid for while letting my sisters believe they were treating me. Every birthday gift I'd given despite my supposed poverty. Every time I'd covered someone's share of a group expense while they complained about my life choices. And the evidence was absolutely overwhelming and completely undeniable, proving that I'd actually been supporting them financially in small ways for years while they'd been congratulating themselves on being generous to their poor, struggling sister. The silence after I sent those receipts was deafening. No responses, no excuses, no attempts to reframe or explain. Just complete radio silence that told me the truth had finally penetrated through all the defensive narratives they'd constructed. My sisters went quiet for almost 3 full weeks after that exchange. No texts, no calls, no social media posts, no surprise visits or parking lot confrontations. And the sudden silence felt somehow more ominous than all their previous noise and chaos and attacks had felt. I knew better than to think this meant everything was resolved, or that they'd accepted the situation, or that relationships were magically healed, because decades of family dysfunction don't evaporate in a few weeks, no matter how definitive the truth might be. But the quiet gave me space to breathe, space to focus on Mom's continued recovery, space to rebuild my sense of stability after weeks of constant assault on my reputation and my character and my professional standing. Mom's recovery continued to exceed every medical prediction and professional expectation, her determination and the quality of care combining to produce results that amazed her doctors and therapists and everyone involved in her treatment. 9 months after her heart attack, Mom was walking independently with just a cane for balance. Her speech had returned to normal functioning, and her mental clarity was actually sharper than it had been before the cardiac event. Like the combination of proper medical care and reduced family stress had somehow allowed her to heal more completely than anyone thought possible for someone her age who'd experienced such a severe medical crisis. The Business Journal article led to speaking invitations at 3 major industry conferences, opportunities to share my story with audiences who were hungry for examples of unconventional success paths and authentic approaches to building careers that honored multiple values simultaneously. Standing in front of hundreds of hospitality professionals and telling my story about serving middle school lunch while building a consulting empire felt surreal and empowering and deeply validating, because these were people who understood the industry and respected the work and could appreciate the unusual path I'd taken to achieve success on my own terms without sacrificing the parts of my life that brought meaning and connection and purpose beyond just making money. 6 months after the initial revelation that had blown our family apart, life had settled into a new rhythm that felt more honest and more sustainable than anything we'd had before. I still served lunch at Jefferson Middle School 5 days a week, arriving early to help with prep work and staying late to ensure cleanup was done properly. and the students welcomed me every day with genuine affection that had nothing to do with my bank balance or my business success, or anything except my consistent presence in their lives and my genuine care for their well-being. Their parents now knew about my business, but it didn't change how they saw me. I was still Miss Sarah, who knew every child's name and their food allergies and whether they preferred the corner brownie pieces or the middle ones. And that constancy of identity across both my roles felt authentic in a way that my hidden double life never quite had. Mom walked with a cane at my second national conference keynote presentation. Her progress so remarkable that the conference organizers asked if she'd be willing to share her story as part of my presentation about building success without abandoning your deepest values and your most important relationships. She sat in the front row, beaming with obvious pride as I discussed the importance of staying grounded and connected to meaningful work, regardless of how much financial success you achieve, and seeing her there healthy and strong and supported gave my words an authenticity that no amount of preparation or practice could have provided, because everyone in that audience could see the living proof of what I'd been talking about. Aunt Patricia had become an unofficial but invaluable part of my business operations, handling scheduling and correspondence and client communications from Mom's house while Mom rested or did therapy exercises. Her organizational skills that had been previously wasted on managing family drama and mediating between feuding sisters proved incredibly valuable for coordinating my growing client base and managing the increasing demands on my time and attention. She told me one evening while we were preparing dinner together that she'd never felt more useful or more appreciated than she did helping me run my business while supporting Mom's recovery. And her eyes filled with tears as she admitted she'd wasted years enabling dysfunction when she could have been building something positive and meaningful with family members who actually wanted to grow and change. Amanda brought her baby daughter to visit every week after Ashley gave birth to a healthy girl who would grow up seeing all forms of work as valuable and worthy of respect. Amanda had started therapy to address what her therapist called her follower mentality, working on taking responsibility for her own choices and judgments, rather than always deferring to Catherine and Jennifer's opinions and assumptions about how the world worked and who deserved respect and what kinds of success actually mattered. The weekly visits were still slightly awkward and tentative. We hadn't magically become close sisters overnight. But there was honesty in our interactions that had never existed before. A willingness to acknowledge reality rather than maintain comfortable fictions about who we were to each other and what our relationships actually meant. Catherine publicly acknowledged me at a medical fundraiser 6 months after our parking lot confrontation, introducing me to her colleagues as her successful sister without any qualifications or dismissive comments or subtle put-downs embedded in the introduction. The acknowledgement clearly cost her something. I could see the effort it took for her to say the words sincerely, but she managed it with something approaching grace. And while we weren't close and might never develop the kind of warm sister relationship that other families seem to have naturally, the public recognition marked real progress toward mutual respect, if not actual affection or understanding. Jennifer worked through intensive therapy addressing the jealousy and resentment that had poisoned her perspective and her relationships for decades, meeting twice weekly with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and sibling rivalry and the ways that comparison culture destroys authentic connection. We exchanged brief, cordial texts about Mom's care and medical appointments, nothing more personal or vulnerable than logistics and scheduling. But even that minimal communication represented progress from the total silence and active hostility that had characterized our relationship during the worst of the conflict. Derek had been the stabilizing force in Jennifer's life for years, and without his influence, she'd been forced to confront truths about herself that she'd avoided examining as long as she had someone else to manage her emotions and moderate her impulses and talk her down from her most destructive tendencies. The family wasn't perfect, and probably never would be perfect. We'd likely never have easy, relaxed holiday gatherings or casual, comfortable sibling bonds or the kind of close family relationships that I sometimes envied when I saw other families interacting with obvious affection and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. But we'd found something more valuable than easy comfort. We'd found honesty. We'd found a foundation of truth that couldn't be shaken by assumptions or pretenses or careful avoidance of difficult topics. The revelation that had shattered their comfortable narratives about me had forced growth that should have happened decades earlier. Growth that was painful and difficult, but ultimately necessary if we were ever going to have relationships based on reality, rather than on convenient fictions that made everyone feel better about their own choices and judgments. My consulting business continued thriving alongside my cafeteria work, with clients specifically requesting me because they'd heard about my commitment to both roles, and they interpreted that dedication as evidence of integrity and follow-through that would translate into better results for their businesses. The elementary school cafeteria job that my sisters had mocked for years had actually become a professional asset, a demonstration of values and priorities that attracted exactly the kind of clients I wanted to work with. People who understood that success without meaning was just an impressive-looking hollow shell that collapsed under any real pressure or challenge. On quiet evenings when I was reviewing contracts at Mom's kitchen table while she watched her favorite shows on the television in the living room, and Aunt Patricia worked on scheduling calls from her laptop in the corner, I sometimes thought about the strange path that had led to this moment. All the early mornings and late nights, all the careful balancing acts between two careers, all the years of staying quiet while family members made assumptions and judgments about my life and my choices and my potential. Every single decision I'd made had led inexorably to this place. This life I'd built on my own terms with success defined by my own values and respect earned through consistent action rather than through loud proclamations or defensive arguments or attempts to prove my worth to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth their full attention or consideration. The truth hadn't set us free in some fairy tale ending with hugs and apologies and perfect reconciliation that erased all the years of hurt and dismissal and casual cruelty. Instead, the truth had forced a reckoning that broke us all down before building something more honest and more real and more capable of withstanding actual challenges without collapsing into dysfunction and blame and desperate attempts to maintain comfortable fictions. My sister's attempts to destroy my reputation and discredit my success had only revealed the life I'd built and the people who truly mattered, and the relationships that were worth preserving versus the ones that had only ever been based on convenient assumptions and unexamined hierarchies that had nothing to do with actual character or real accomplishment. In the end, this whole experience taught me that respect earned through quiet, consistent action over years and years is worth infinitely more than approval sought through meeting other people's expectations or fitting into their narrow definitions of acceptable success. My sisters learned painfully and publicly that assumptions are dangerous, and that underestimating people based on limited information reveals more about the person making assumptions than about the person being judged. And I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to succeed on your own terms without seeking permission or approval or validation from people who are never going to truly see you anyway until circumstances force them to open their eyes and confront reality.